That
Welcome back to the Wide Ride Podcast. Man, what a dumb name for a podcast. Miami's always sucks is more like it. Anyway, I'm your host this week, Kurt Reynolds, president of the Florida State Flying Club. This week, I'm here to make fun of Mario Cristobal and his little 6-2 football team who needed double overtime to beat Dabo Weenie in Clemson 2 weeks ago. Needed to play overtime again just to beat Virginia this past week. For some reason, my producer, Bobby Jimbo James, decided to book this guy as our guest. Uncle Fluke. Mr. Fluke is here to tell us why Mario refuses to take a knee when he's actually winning and why he can't beat North Carolina, but Virginia and Georgia Tech can. Uncle Fluke, the floor is yours.
Let me tell you something, Kurt, Billy Bob, Reynolds, Jameson, whatever your name is, Jim Beam. The reason Mario can't take a knee is because his back is too messed up from banging your mother, who happens to be your cousin and your sister. And that's the way we do Seminoles down here, baby. Right in the semi-hole. Bang. Notice the gear. Notice the championships right here. How many are these? I'm sorry, you can't count that high because you're a Seminole fan. Those are 5 titles, my man. All right? Don't be getting on me, son. That brings them. Look at the chain. Look at the work with the chain, son. Look at this. Look at this. You can't deal with this. I got more bling than you have teeth.
Thanks for that very interesting take, I guess, Uncle Fluke. I can't wait to hear what Tyler from Spartanburg has to say about all that. Anyway, it's time to do the real show. I'm your host, Manny Navarro. He's Carlos Ledo of the MIA All Day Podcast. Happy Halloween. You can see that we're up in our costumes today. It's around 1 p.m. here on a Tuesday. Miami Hurricanes are 6-2, as I mentioned, still very much alive in the race to reach Charlotte for the ACC title game. But a daunting month of November awaits, Carlos. We'll get to that in a second. Been some news here in the last 24 to 48 hours. Number one, the ACC released its schedule for the next 7 seasons with the new additions to the league, Cal, Stanford, and SMU. Miami has 2 protected rivalry games as part of this, FSU Miami, and again, Virginia Tech Miami, which was good. That was sort of lost last year when they decided to go to the 3-5-5 format. I'm glad the ACC decided to make Miami Virginia Tech an annual rivalry again. Good news there. We'll discuss that in a bit. We'll preview November, answer mailbag questions. But first, Carlos, I've got to take this wig off because, first of all, it's itchy as hell. So
yeah, it looks uncomfortable.
It's very itchy. It's very itchy. I don't know why I decided that I needed long hair or even this stinking FSU hat, but I wanted.
But let me tell you something. Having the wig on reminds me of what you used to look like when you went to the Kitchen Club back in the day in the 90s in the Grove.
Yes, it looked pretty horrible. So anyway, I can't take this FSU shirt off. First of all, it's 2 sizes too small, so I feel like it's like completely wrapped around my body. So please bear with me, Miami fans. Besides, you guys say I'm a Florida State fan anyway, so it actually feels natural for me to be wearing this. Anyway, Carlos, I want to talk about my trip to Jacksonville, and I know you're probably thinking to yourself, why the hell do we want to talk Gators, Georgia? First of all, I got to see the number 1 team in the country. I got to see what it's supposed to look like, right? When you've got a great team paired up with somebody else, and the Gators got absolutely manhandled in that game. Georgia really took it to them in Jacksonville, and we lost Carlos obviously here for a second. Hopefully he'll jump back in here in a minute. But the Gators looked absolutely awful. Georgia looked really, really good in winning that game. And I thought, the one big takeaway for me, number one, Miami plays Florida next year early on in the season. I think August 31st. So I got a good chance to sort of look at the Gators, see their roster, see how it sort of compares to Miami. And I know a lot's going to change. They've got a really good recruiting class. They got DJ Lagway, the quarterback, coming in. Miami kind of has an interesting situation at quarterback themselves, letting Carlos back in here to the discussion as we record. But the Gators, what I really studied in that game was the offensive and defensive lines. And Carlos, welcome back. I was just telling our listeners here how going to the game in Jacksonville, I got a chance to see Florida up close.
I dropped off on purpose because we were talking Gator football.
I apologize. I know I'll try to keep it short, but Miami does open the season with them next year on August 31st in Gainesville, and seeing Georgia sort of manhandle them up front on the offensive and defensive lines, which is really what Mario's trying to build, right? He's trying to build a superpower there. Gave me a lot of hope for the Hurricanes that when they start that game next season, regardless of who's playing quarterback for them, I think Miami can beat the Gators, right? If they were to play right now, I'd pick Miami to beat Florida. What are your thoughts on looking ahead to that rivalry game?
Listen, I will never pick the Gators. I don't care how good they are. To me, there is a stronger hatred for the Gators than there is for Florida State. At the very least, Florida State is respectable because they play us every season. They don't dodge the Hurricanes. They don't make excuses about their conference being too tough and having to add you onto the schedule. Just really doesn't work for us because we promised Coastal Carolina Tech of the blind and wicked that we were going to play them this year. We can't give you guys that slot, so sorry. Listen, they're if they play the Gators this year, they would maul the Gators just based on principle. All right, that's going to be my score prediction anytime they play the Gators. I don't care who's a quarterback. Tim Tebow, Connor Maynard, Garrett Mertzofitz, bring back Danny Werfel. I don't care. Bring whoever you want. All right, doesn't matter.
Well, I think, and we'll talk about this more as the summer goes along, but I think when you just look at the way both of these coaches, Billy Napier and Mario, are building their teams, Billy Napier's recruiting class this year is better, the one that he's building, than the one Mario has at the moment. I think a large part of that is they've got a lot of good players in their front seven. They're recruiting linebackers, rush ends, etc. They got the number 3 class in the country, but Miami at last check I think was 11th. But he's done a good job recruiting. But what you saw sort of get exposed in that game was the fact that they go for a 4th and 1 deep in their own territory, and they got to run a trick play just to move the line of scrimmage forward, to try to move the line of scrimmage forward a few feet. And so I think, up front, that's where Miami probably right now, when you think Miami and Florida, who's further along in the development, I would say certainly Miami in that regard because of the offensive line. Now, look, Miami's going to have to replace some guys, Javian Cohen, Matt Lee. Both of those guys will probably be gone after the season. Matt Lee for sure because he's out of eligibility. Javian Cohen has 1 year left, but probably going pro. So they'll have some guys in the offensive line to replace. But again, that it speaks to me like, and it'll be an interesting thing to watch in the years to come because Miami and Florida will go head to head for recruits. They will go head to head on the field the next couple of years. I think it's an important thing to sort of watch develop over the next couple of years to see who gets further ahead. Will it be Miami or Florida? Right now, for sure, we can all agree the T-shirt I'm wearing, that team right now is a little bit further ahead than everybody else.
Well, yeah, and I think it's because of the way they've each had to construct their teams and the situations that they've run into when they first took those teams over. Jimbo Fisher left the cupboard pretty well stocked at Florida State before he left, even though it was a transition and they had to flip that over. Norvell's had to use the transfer portal a little bit more than most, and he's gotten some really good acquisitions through there and also built up the recruiting classes now. To me, Mario's philosophy of building the lines up front before he really tries to build everything else, or at least focusing on that initially, is the way to build the foundation for a successful program, as we've talked about in the past. And I think Florida has tried to focus more on the skill positions and on the rush ends and the corners and the receivers and running backs and stuff like that. But you cannot be successful if you can't block or tackle, and if you can't control the line of scrimmage. So if your quarterback is running around for his life and you can't make a first down by putting the hammer down and running for it, traditionally, you have to use a gadget play to try and pick up a 4th and 1. Then you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, how well is this team constructed? Have we done the right thing? And I think Mario, for the most part, is building this in his own image, in his style, and he likes to build it from the ground up, from the inside out. And I think that's going to work out. There's going to be some difficulties, obviously, in recruiting skill position players sometimes in this kind of a system or in this kind of a culture, the way Mario likes to play it. But all it takes is a little bit of success and momentum to be able to get to that point where guys start to take notice and say, you know what, this is probably the place for me, those skill position guys.
So I didn't get to watch the game entirely. I did have it on my phone as the Gators were getting their asses kicked. I wasn't exactly tied into the Florida-Georgia game, even though I was there in person to watch it. Once it kind of escaped, I was able to tune into the Miami game. And obviously they fell behind early 10-0. Came back to win the game in overtime, 29-26. But Tyler Van Dyke was really the story in this game because coming back from injury, he was really beat up. I thought going into this game, nowhere near 100%. And I thought the way that he played, the interceptions he threw, some of the decision making, he just couldn't get the ball to where it needed to go to. And look, he's thrown a lot of interceptions. I'm not trying to make an excuse for him. But Carlos, that was my thought process. Miami basically had a decision. Mario Cristobal had a decision. He could have kept Emory Williams in the lineup if Tyler Van Dyke wasn't banged up, or was banged up and didn't have necessarily the confidence in him. But ultimately, he and offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson both felt it was important to play Tyler in this game. Uh, finished 20 of 30, 163 yards, 2 picks. Not his finest performance by any stretch of the imagination. You watched that game from beginning to end. I watched bits and pieces of it, went back and watched it again. Did you come away with the same impression that I did, or was Tyler just horrible, in terms of some of the decisions that he made? I thought it was a physical ailment.
Uh, um, I don't know that it was all physical. I think that played a part in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was some stuff where you could see where he was hobbled. He couldn't really get around in the pocket a lot. He can throw on the move as he would normally like to or be able to. Some of the throws downfield maybe were affected a little bit by his injury, but I think it was a combination of him just not being mentally right and also the game plan coming into me not being right as well. I think it's a combination of all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it confirmed it when Mario Cristobal went on the Joe Rose show yesterday, and he said they played coverage a lot more than we expected.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Mario, if you and Shannon Dawson came into this game believing that Virginia was going to man you up and dare you to throw the ball over the top and bring pressure from different angles, and I, an idiot who has no affiliation with college football, who does not coach, who does not, I might have coached a little high school ball, but not good high school ball. I was terrible as a coach. Can identify the fact that this guy has issues reading coverages and throwing into coverage windows. And you see the game plan that's been used against him recently by Georgia Tech, now by Virginia. He's at North Carolina, and what Virginia did to Drake May. Like, how did you not anticipate that we're going to play coverage 90% of the time? Like, I went on my podcast, and this is, again, listen, sorry, guys, if this sounds braggy. I'm not bragging. I'm just telling you what I said on my podcast ahead of time, because on my podcast, what I like to do is identify what I think the teams are going to do against the Hurricanes and what the Hurricanes need to do to be successful for the most part. And what I saw was, I thought Virginia was going to play a lot of coverage. I thought they would only bring 5 guys at a time, maybe 6 on occasion, which they did. They only brought 5 most of the game. And I thought Miami was going to have to be prepared to face those sorts of coverages because Tyler can't throw against them. And I thought Tyler would give them the best shot to win because he's the better quarterback at this stage in his career. Now, the issue becomes when you come into a game with a game plan that's set for a certain type of coverage, which they were expecting man and pressure, because they felt since Tyler was hurt and he had a bruised knee that he couldn't move in the pocket, they felt Virginia was going to bring the heat on him, and they didn't. They just sat back. At that point, you've got to adjust then, right? You've got to change what you're coming in to do. And they didn't do that. They maybe got into a flow of it in the third quarter a bit and in the fourth, but you just have to be able to be better than that as a coach and think on your feet a little bit better and come into a game expecting one thing and be prepared for the next. I mean, I honestly don't know how they didn't expect that, zone coverage most of the game. And how do you break that down then, right? Because that's going to be the situation moving forward for the rest of the season. NC State is not a big zone team. They're a 3-3-5 stack. They like to bring pressure from angles. They'll mix it up in coverage, but they like to play man. They're going to play zone too. They're going to drop 8 a lot. They're going to give Tyler coverages he can't really read and understand because they've seen the tape. And it's been the same since, he was a redshirt freshman and hasn't improved. And that's his weakness. But then you have to, as an offensive coordinator, put him in the best position possible. What does Tyler do well? Well, Tyler does. He likes to throw the ball quickly, likes to get it down the field or make quick reads and throw it quickly, right? And get it out of his hands. So where are the RPOs? This team has not used an RPO all season, right? Why are RPOs good against zone? Because it forces the defense to commit, right? And then open those gaps and those windows and make the throwing windows clearer and wider for the quarterback to be able to read. And it's also a smaller read progression for the quarterback because the first thing he's doing is reading a first level defender, usually defensive end, and a second level defender, usually a linebacker or a defensive back. Or sometimes with the RPOs, you will just read the second level defender if you want to throw it in that window. Okay. And we have that. The Hurricanes have not done that this season. They haven't made it easy on Tyler when he used to make money on those throws under Rhett Lashley, and even under Josh Gaddis, we threw some RPOs and they were successful, but not as much as as they did as under Lashley. The other thing they have to do is they have to try and confuse coverages by using motion. The Hurricanes rarely motion. They're too static of a team. They're too static in the way they line up. The only motion they use is the tight end motion from one side to the other to give him some momentum to kick out the defensive end or to lead up inside of a hole. They don't use motion to confuse coverage, and that's a problem. The other thing they need to do is to use formations to make the defense give away the coverage.
Right.
You overload one side with trips. You motion out of that also. You do different things to make the defense easier to identify and create an opportunity for Tyler to know where to go with the football before the snap even happens. But they haven't done that. So, yes, Tyler's at fault for a lot of the interceptions. He's staring receivers down. He's not reading the coverage. That throw where he had the interception by the safety over the top, it was covered too. He had a whole shot that he needed to make, and he just left it inside too much, and he didn't anticipate the safety getting over. They baited him into the throw. It just wasn't a good decision by him. He had other opportunities where he had guys open, and he missed them and chose to go other places with the football, oftentimes to Restrepo. And it just has to be a situation where Tyler and Shannon Dawson get on the same page. They identify what Tyler does well. They identify who they need to get the football to, because my God, is Colby Young underused in this offense? And you can't just anticipate giving Brashard Smith a handoff and then he's going to run for 80 yards every time. You got to give him the ball in space. You've got to do things to help these guys make plays. And I don't think the offense is lending itself to that. And I don't think Tyler Van Dyke is being put in a position to be the most successful. And at the same time, I don't think Tyler is playing that well because he doesn't feel comfortable in what he's doing, what he's seeing.
All great points, dude. First of all, a couple little notes from the game just to sort of back some of the stuff you were saying. According to Pro Football Focus, Virginia only blitzed Tyler on 6 of his 30 dropbacks, only 20% of the time. Other teams have done that more often. But you're right; they're basically dropping into coverage, saying we're gonna just pick you off and force you into turnovers. And like you said, he doesn't look comfortable in what they're running. The other aspect I would say, 27 more plays run by Virginia in this game. They came in, their game plan was much better than Miami's. And I thought, considering the way Miami ran the ball against Clemson, the fact that they only attempted 26 rushes for 113 yards and threw it 30 times was probably a mistake as well. I would have come out from the get-go and tried to run the football on this team and set the tone. Again, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if they're holding stuff back. I know the schedule gets a lot tougher in November. We're going to talk about that in a bit. But to have 276 yards of total offense against Virginia, who I know is a much improved 2-16, by the way. Okay, they should have probably beaten NC State. They played Boston College tough. Like they're not a horrible 2-6 team. They've gotten better. Tony Elliott, I think, is doing a pretty good job with what he has to work with. That said, if the offensive line is your strength, I don't know why you only ran the ball 26 times. You should have run it a lot more, even with some guys banged up. In the end, you get Mark Fletcher back. He finishes with 47 yards, including the game-winning touchdown run. A.J. Allen had that highlight hurdle run, finished with 67 yards in the score as well. Maybe we get Henry Parrish back this week. Maybe, Don Chaney Jr. is back as well. I know Trevante Citizen is back practicing. They still haven't sort of trusted him yet to get in there and pass block. But the point is, you have enough running backs where you don't have to wear somebody down here over the month of November. And if I were Mario, knowing the way my quarterback is playing, I would do everything in my power to run the ball 60-40 instead of the other way around where you're passing it 60-40.
Well, it creates better opportunities for him as well. We've discussed this a ton of times. What does having a strong running game do? It makes you commit more guys to the box, which opens up throwing windows and gets you man coverage. Because what you have to do now is, because teams are going to try and play you zone all the time, it's like when you're playing high school basketball and you're playing these teams that like to play zone to slow the game down. What you have to do is pull them out of the zone. Yeah. You get a lead, you run, you score in fast breaks, and you pull them out of the zone by holding the ball and forcing them to match up with you. And that's what the Hurricanes have to do with the run game, motion, and formations. And to speak about it, not only do you have to use the running game, but if you want to preserve some of those running backs or even add another dimension to the offense, which you should, they're not throwing bubble screens. They're not throwing now screens. They're throwing these quick screens that they've run all season, these quick tunnel screens that are getting blown up by people now because they've seen it so many times. But they have not run bubble screens. They have not run now screens. Those are runs too. Those are effective to help the quarterback get in a rhythm and get you 3-4 yards and keep the chains moving. Also, I think defensively, they could have come in with a better plan, but we'll talk about that later.
Carlos, I looked ahead to November. I broke down all of the opponents on Miami's schedule. First of all, you got 3 winning teams on the schedule. NC State's 5-3. Their losses are to Notre Dame, Louisville, and Duke. So you can't say you're
really good teams.
3 good teams. Florida State's unbeaten at 8-0. They're ranked 7th in the ESPN Power Index. NC State's ranked 51st. Miami's ranked 23rd. You got Louisville, who's ranked 21st. They're 7-1. Their only loss is to Pittsburgh, which I know Pat Narduzzi's kind of has a mess on his hands, but look, they fell asleep at the wheel for 1 week, came back and absolutely dominated Duke this week, 23-0 to get to 7 wins. And then Boston College, who has a really dangerous quarterback in Thomas Castellanos, who has run for 673 yards and
That dude
9
is nasty.
touchdowns. And he's a dual threat. And they're 5-3 now. Yes, they lost to Northern Illinois to start the season. But their other 2 losses at 5-3 are just to FSU and Louisville. Okay. I know their most impressive win isn't necessarily great as Georgia Tech, but still they're 5-3 and playing well. So I guess let's start with this, and we're gonna get to mailbag questions and all that kind of stuff in a little bit. But my first question to you, Carlos, when you look ahead to the month of November, looking at the health situation of Miami, Akeem Mesidor out for the season, Nigel Lee Kelly out for the season. This defense, who we haven't talked about yet, Ruben Bain is playing out of his mind, 6.5 sacks to lead the team. They had 6 sacks in this last game. They're playing well, but they're going to need the offense to step up their game. And there's some good defensive teams that they're facing here down the stretch, and we'll get into each of them. In your mind, before I even break down any of these numbers, what are you thinking at 6-2? How do you think this season finishes?
I mean, 2-2 would be great. If they could finish 8-4, I think that'd be a real successful season. Especially the way Tyler's playing right now, the way he's injured. If you have to go to Emory Williams at some point, finishing 8-4, coming off of a 5-7 season. We said it before the season even started. Regardless of how the season plays out, 8-4 would be a successful season. So I think that's very realistic. I think if the offense gets it together, if they come in with a good plan the next few weeks, they can go 3-1 realistically and finish 9-3. So, I'm between 8-4 and 9-3.
Okay, I'm at 8-4 and 7-5, and the only reason I say that is I haven't seen the offense adapt yet
No.
To these injuries and some of the players being banged up. Do I have the confidence they can finish 9-3? Yes, I think they could. I think they could finish 9-3. I think there's even a chance they could go to FSU with the right game plan and pull off a stunner and beat the Seminoles, as good as the Seminoles are. But I'm of the opinion I'm leaning more towards 7-5, 8-4, just because they're playing some good teams that have a little bit of confidence. To me, of the 4 games that they have left, the most winnable is this week against NC State.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
because Boston College is at the end of the year. You don't know who's going to be standing after the FSU game and the Louisville game. Those are going to be physical battles as well. So from a health perspective, I have a feeling Miami's going to be more banged up when they go to play Boston College than they are NC State this weekend. So let's talk about NC State first, because that's the game coming up this week. I think Miami's a 5-point favorite last time I looked at it. NC State's offense averaging 25 points a game, which is 83rd in the country, 25.3. From a first downs, yards per play perspective, 103rd and 112th. So it's not like they're moving the chains a whole lot. Touchdowns to interceptions, 11-10. Yards per pass play, they're 115th. Pass blocking efficiency, they're 83rd. 65th in sacks allowed. MJ Morris, the second-year freshman, is their quarterback. Their leading rusher, Carlos, I couldn't believe this when I saw this, is still Brendan Armstrong. That's how bad they run the football. Their former starting quarterback is their leading rusher with 286 yards, and their top receiver is a true freshman in Kevin Concepcion. They're not very good on third down. They're 78th in third down offense. Where they are good, or where they're better, is clearly on defense, where they've got, a guy like Peyton Wilson at linebacker, only giving up 23 points a game, which is 48th. They're 50th or 49th in yards per play. Turnovers gains. They've produced 14 turnovers in their games, which is 28th. Rushing yards per game, they're only giving up 3.48 yards rushing, which is 30th in the country. And opponent QBR, they're 44th. So a pretty good defense. When you look at this game, I know I don't know if you've broken down NC State completely on your own, but what do you think is the key to victory for Miami against the Wolfpack?
Turnovers. Number one, turnovers. I think if Miami protects the ball and wins the turnover battle, they will win this game. I think, coming into the game against Virginia, I thought turnovers and the third quarter were going to be the key, because going into that Virginia game, Miami had been outscored in ACC play 45-7 in the third quarter. Luckily, they came out ahead of that third quarter, 14-10. We had that touchdown run. I think that was the AJ Allen touchdown run, followed by the Cam Kitchens pick six. So that got the Hurricanes in a position where they could take it to overtime at the end of the game and win it. If they didn't have that kind of a third quarter, if it was another repeat performance from before, they would have lost that game. I think it's the same situation here. I think the turnovers are the key. This offense for NC State is not very good. They're not going to score points unless you give them opportunities to score points and do that on a short field. If you give them the ball on a short field, they're at least going to get 3 points out of it. They may get 7 if you don't play them well, or if they come up with something out of their butt, if they throw like the annexation of Puerto Rico and they get a touchdown out of that play. But for me, what you don't want to do against a bad offense is give them multiple opportunities. It's just like playing, against a guy who's a terrible shooter. If you give him enough shots, he's going to make 1 or 2, right? And then normally when you're playing a pickup basketball game, the worst shooter makes the shots at the worst possible time against you, right? It's game point, and I'll leave him alone. Bang, there it goes. Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure that you don't give these guys extra opportunities to try and score points, that you protect the ball on your side and you create more opportunities for yourself with turnovers on the defensive end. If the Hurricanes can win the turnover battle, I'm very confident they win this game very easily.
All right. I'm going to pick Miami to win this week. I think by a touchdown. I think they'll cover the spread. But I think it's going to be a tight game in the fourth quarter. And I think ultimately what's going to win it is the running game. I think I'm picking Miami to win this running the football and by playing a clean football game without turnovers. Maybe 1, but that's the way they'll win this game, like 27-20, something where it's not uber sexy, but the defense does its job and they run the football, and that's how they win this game. As far as
they got to be +2 at least in turnovers.
Yeah, as far as Florida State, Louisville, and BC, I mean, look, I'm going to go over them briefly real quick. These are some stats that just stuck out to me that were really impressive for each of these teams. First of all, Florida State's 5th in scoring. They're averaging 41.5 points per game. Miami's averaging 35 a game, okay? Turnovers lost for Florida State, 4 the whole season, okay? They've only turned it over 4 times in their 8 games, so that's 2nd in the country. Jordan Travis, his touchdown to interception ratio 18-2. He's completing close to 65% of his passes. Trey Benson is their leading rusher. Keon Coleman, their leading receivers, got 9 touchdown passes. They're 26th in third down conversions, close to 45%. Red zone touchdown percentage close to 94%, which is top 20. They're playing really well, and to me, the defense is sort of undervalued a little bit, I think, as well. They're a top 20 defense in terms of scoring. And then this is really impressive, Carlos. They've given up 3 touchdown passes the entire season. They've got 5 picks. So to me, you can say what you want about their secondary. I think that was a question we had going into the season. Like, how good are they going to be back there? We thought the front 7 would be really, really good. They're not getting a ton of sacks. They're 33rd, 2.63, which is actually less than Miami. Miami's 9th in sacks. But in terms of third down defense, they're 14th in the country. Red zone touchdown percentage, they're 13th in the country. This is an elite Florida State team.
I don't know about elite. To me, they're a really good ACC football team. I think they're the best team in the conference. I don't think they match up well against other teams that will be in the playoff, to be quite honest. I think they're good. They're really good. I don't think they're elite just yet. They haven't looked elite to me. I think they've struggled against some lower tier teams too often to me for me to be able to say these guys are nasty. These guys are legit. They are a really good football team. I think the concern for me is the turnovers. They're not turning the football over. They're being very efficient with the ball. They can run the football, they can throw the football, but there's not one part of their game to me that is overwhelming to where you say, damn, wow, that's nasty. Wow, these guys are so good. They're just really good all around. And I think teams like that, if they have a bad day, can be gotten. I think they don't have the type of team to me that can overcome a really horrendous day. I think if you're in a battle with them in the fourth quarter, you got a shot. And I think you saw it against Boston College, saw it against other teams. They were saved against Boston College because of all those penalties that Boston College was racking up. So to me, there's a shot to beat this team, but you have to play your best game. To me, if Florida State comes in and plays their average game, what they normally do, and if Miami comes in and plays their average game, what they normally do, I think Florida State runs away with it. But I think Miami has to elevate their game and play at a different level and hope to cause Florida State to play one of their worst games of the season and muddy it up for them. And I think being physical, getting after the quarterback, forcing Jordan Travis into bad throws, keeping him in the pocket, and not letting him beat you with their legs, which is really the difficult thing about that offense is you have this guy hemmed in, you got everything covered, you feel you got it down, you're going to go in there for a sack, and this guy eludes you and escapes and runs for a first down. That's the difficulty of their offense. And I think Benson is one of those running backs that can get hot, and when he gets hot, he's tough to stop.
Louisville, I think, has the best running back Miami will face this season in Jawar Jordan, who's the number 2 leading rusher in the conference, 824 yards rushing for the season, 10 touchdowns. They're averaging 4.77 yards per carry, which is 34th. Their quarterback, Plummer, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Their offense is basically predicated around Jordan and then Jamari Thrash, the receiver, their big play receiver, who's got 46 catches for 712 yards and 6 touchdowns. They've basically got two big playmakers. They're okay in terms of third down. I mean, actually, third down, they're 37.5%. Red zone touchdown percentage, they're 82nd. Both of those numbers in the 80s. Really, it's Jordan, a big part of this offense, and their big play passing wise. They're 19th in yards per pass as far as an offense, averaging just under 33 points a game. Defensively, that's where I think they kind of surprised me a little bit, Carlos, because I know when I broke down Louisville in the preseason, they had lost a lot of their elite passers. They were one of the best teams in the country in terms of sacking opposing quarterbacks last year. And then they lost some guys to the NFL in the portal. This year they're averaging 2.38 sacks per game. Austin Jalot, who I think he's among the ACC leaders, 8.5 sacks. He's their top player. They're really good on third down. They're a top 10 third down defense right now, allowing fewer than 30% in terms of conversions. And then their run defense is really, really good. 3.03 per carry, which is 12th. Miami is 7th in the country in terms of run defense, 2.79 yards per carry. So, but this is a game at Miami following Florida State. It's going to be a really interesting matchup, but I think, it could, if Miami somehow is able to pull the upset at FSU, everyone's going to look at that game and say, man, they better not fall asleep at the wheel against Louisville, because that's how they'll get themselves eliminated from the conference contention.
I mean, it's a difficult game regardless because how much you're going to have left following that Florida State game. Generally, those games are wars.
Yeah.
And, at the end of it, you got a lot of guys banged up. A lot of guys don't have a lot of juice left. And whoever that next opponent is, it's going to be a tighter game than it should be because of those physical ailments and everything you gave the week before. So it's going to be interesting to see. So basically, this game is going to come down to, I think the rest of the season is really going to come down to, can you stop the run from the opponent, and can you run the ball well yourself? That's basically what it's going to come down to. Because the Garden Snake is playing really well for Louisville, Plummer, but he's not somebody that scares me. It's overwhelmingly good. Their running game is really the cornerstone for them, and Thrash is the guy that they rely on to get deep on defenses and make plays. Just like Castellanos with Boston College, he's the guy I'm worried about. With his legs, can you stop the running game with him? The zone reads, keeping him in the pocket, forcing him to bad throws down the road. It's going to be a situation where the Hurricanes have to continue to maintain this identity of being a run-stopping team. But I think to do that, going back to the Virginia game, I think they made a mistake coming into that game and going back to a 4-2-5 when they had just been so successful against Clemson in that 3-3-5. It gave Clemson problems blocking up front. It allowed linebackers to get to the football a lot freer and a lot quicker. It allowed you to use linebackers more often in stopping the run, and then had you match up KJ Cloyd on tight ends and slot receivers on occasion, which he's really good at. He's a good cover guy in terms of being a linebacker, and allowed the defense to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of their looks and how they handle things, and also use James Williams in the box as a thing to confuse the offense. And I think they would have used that against Virginia. They would have blocked things a lot better. But I think Virginia was able to get away with a lot of stuff in the running game because Miami was back to that 4-2-5. I think Leonard Taylor plays a lot better playing at nose over the center, having to double gapping and playing off one guy as opposed to trying to beat a double team or trying to fight off a pull and things of that nature. I think it just plays better to everybody's strengths if they play that 3-3-5 and allows Miami to be a little bit more aggressive defensively. I'd like to see them use that moving forward and go back to it now in this game against NC State and moving forward the rest of the season.
Boston College, I'm not going to get too far down the rabbit hole with them. They're obviously not as good as FSU and Louisville. In fact, they're 114th on defense in yards per play, 108th in rushing defense. They've given up 13 touchdowns and only forced 4 interceptions. They're giving up 8.3 yards per pass, which is 121st, and they've got the fewest tackles for loss in the country, 132nd, 126th in sacks. I mean, defensively, that's the kind of game that you look at and you say, well, Miami at the end of the year, you hope they're healthy enough to just take care of business and score enough points to beat Boston College. But Castellanos is going to be a problem for them. He's been a problem for other teams. He was a problem for Florida State. But who knows what kind of mental state Miami will be at that point in the season, considering Florida State and Louisville are the 2 previous weeks. So,
and if they've gone over there, let's say they lose to NC State and Florida State and Louisville, and they lose 3 in a row, There's guys who are going to check out and make a business decision and say, listen, I got to get ready for the draft or next season or the transfer portal.
Right.
That'll be another issue.
Right. All right. So we broke down November. I wanted to get to some of the mailbag questions. I also wanted to get to the ACC future scheduling. And I tweeted this out earlier for some of the followers because some of the non-conference games are included. But Carlos, I guess your initial response, did you see the new ACC scheduling or did you not even care?
Yeah, I saw it. Listen, I follow your tweets like a stalker, man. I'm hiding behind the bushes, reading those tweets, looking at you in your window,
All
looking inside
right.
the kitchen. I'm like Ghostface from Scream. You don't know when I'm there. I'm in the
Well,
house.
well, listen, in 24, 25, and 26, Miami will be going to all three of the new teams. They will have at least one road game at the three new additions each of those years. So they'll play at Cal in 24, at SMU in 25, and at Stanford in 26. Then in 27, they just have their traditional ACC rivals, Duke, FSU, NC State, Virginia Tech. In 28, it's BC, Pitt, Syracuse, and Virginia. In 29, uh, they'll go back on the road to play Cal, FSU, NC State, Virginia Tech, and then in 2030, Clemson, North Carolina, SMU, and Virginia. So they'll have it's kind of like a little rotation there, but essentially, they'll get the three new teams right away. At least one of those trips on the road. They'll also get to host them. Miami will be hosting Stanford in 2025, and they get Cal in 27, and then SMU comes in 29. So we'll get a look at these new programs. What I did like about what happened yesterday is that Miami, Virginia Tech was brought back. And I think for all of us, Carlos, that was such an important series to continue and make it an annual rivalry. I know Virginia Tech look, they've got a chance to reach the ACC championship game this year. They've only got one conference loss. They do have Louisville this week. But point is, Brent Pry is trying to turn it around. Mario Cristobal is trying to turn it around. And I think when Miami and Virginia Tech play each other, it's a game that everybody wants to watch if you're a Miami fan.
Yeah, to me, that's the second best rivalry for the Hurricanes over the last 20 years, aside from Florida State, right? So, I mean, that's their
Yeah.
biggest conference rival aside from Florida State, going back to the Big East. I mean, before they had Florida State in their conference, it usually came down to Miami, Virginia Tech, a lot in that conference. And throughout the years, there have been some incredible battles between those two teams. You'd always expect a tough game between the two of them. Very rarely is there a blowout one way or another. And of course, the environment in Blacksburg is tremendous. So it's always fun to play up there, watch them play up there, and see how they deal with that kind of environment.
What's interesting is before Miami and Florida State and Miami, Virginia Tech, there was kind of alternate. Like one year, Miami would have to go to Florida State and then host Virginia Tech. Like it alternated. Now it's home and home. Like next year, Miami gets Florida State and Virginia Tech at home in 2024, but then in 25, they've got to go on the road to play FSU and Virginia Tech. So that's sort of an interesting little wrinkle where now they're kind of on the same line. The 2024 home schedule, not exactly sexy. I added in the non-conference games. The home schedule, if you want to go watch the 24 Canes, Florida A&M, Ball State, Duke, Florida State, Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest. Wake Forest hasn't been here in a long time. So that'll be new. And then of course Duke, who is seems like an entirely new program under Mike Elko. And then the road schedule, Florida, USF, Cal. I'll be going to there hopefully. Georgia Tech, Louisville, and Syracuse. So Syracuse is a place Miami hasn't played at in a while either, Carlos. We haven't been in the Carrier Dome or whatever the hell it's called now in a long time. That'll be interesting. The 25 home schedule is the one that I'm excited about because it's ridiculous. Have you seen this 25 home schedule?
Notre Dame and Florida in the same year, right?
Notre Dame, Florida, USF, Louisville, NC State, Stanford, and Syracuse. Those are the 7 home games right now. Only 4 away games at the moment. Florida State, Pitt, SMU, and Virginia Tech. So they will obviously add another opponent because they're going to have a 12-game schedule. But the home schedule in 25 is super interesting. Of course, some of the other non-conference games to discuss. Miami will be at Notre Dame in 2026. South Carolina will be coming here to Hard Rock Stadium in 27. Miami will be, let's see who else. I'm looking at all these. USF is here the next couple years. They have Auburn.
What's the over under on Shane Beamer being the coach of South Carolina by the time they come down here?
I don't know. That's a great question.
Probably not.
him and Dabo may have switched spots by then, after what Dabo's kind of going through up there at Clemson this year. But anyway, interesting. If you want to check out the entire schedule, I tweeted out what we have through 2030 for Miami. So if you want to check it out, go ahead and look at my Twitter account, Manny_Navarro. All right, let's take a look here, Carlos, because I did request mailbag questions and I did get some responses. So let me sift through these and then we'll wrap this puppy up. This is from Jake Campbell, the one coach soup. Manny, 2/3 of the season is done. What's your overall grade on the Cardiac Canes? I think year over year they've made huge improvements at just about every position. There's not a single position group in my head where I think they've regressed. So my thought is B or B minus. Thoughts, Carlos? You can answer that one first.
Well, the season's not over yet, and I think they're starting to regress to quarterback. So I think that statement's a little false. I mean, when you compare it to last season, yes, their quarterback play is better overall. But the way the season started, I think the quarterback play clearly is regressing. You've got Tyler throwing only 5 touchdowns to 7 interceptions in his 3 ACC games. That's not good. Emory Williams 1-1 in his game. It's a situation where they need to improve at the quarterback position to have a shot to finish the season strong, or else it's not going to happen. I do agree the offensive line looks better, defensive line looks better, secondary looks a little bit better to me. I would say B minus.
I'm gonna go with B plus, and I'm gonna say this: the tight end has been completely non-existent in this
Yep.
offense, so that's where I have the biggest problem in terms of regression. The fact that it's just not a part of the offense whatsoever beyond blocking. So to me, that's a big regression there. But I think in a lot of other places, it has gotten better. I think Emory Williams, I'm enthusiastic about the future with him. I think he's going to be a good quarterback at Miami. I'd like to see Jakari Brown. I know that's a subject we haven't even touched on yet. The coaches were asked quite a bit about the backup quarterbacks going into this week, after Tyler struggled as much as he did. But I am a little concerned about tight end, and I think that's the one area. Quarterback, I'm not. I think a lot of this with Tyler has to do with him being banged up. He took some huge hits against North Carolina to the ribs, to the knee, to his back. He was pile drive pretty hard in that game and a lot of spots, and I don't think he's playing anywhere near 100% right now. I would say tight end is more of a sort of curious position. Elijah Lofton, the 2024 commitment, the 4-star kid that Miami has committed at tight end, one of the best in the country. He's supposedly reportedly visiting Texas this week. So not a good sign that Miami's tight ends are not producing, and that kid who went to the same school as Brevin Jordan out in Las Vegas, Bishop Gorman, is reportedly taking a visit out there. So
Yeah, if he sees the offense ignoring his position, he might want to go somewhere else.
Yeah. All right. This is from Rusty Sedaris, R. Sedaris on Twitter. Is Mario messing with the offense again, or is this all Dawson/TVD problem? I'll start on this one, Carlos. I think this is a collective deal, right? If you listen to Shannon Dawson's press conference on Monday, he talked about how he and Mario discuss what they're going to do with the quarterback position week to week to week. The head coach is always involved in this. Is he in charge of the game plan? No. I think Mario tries to influence the game plan and say, hey, we should be more conservative this week, or hey, we should take more shots down the field this week. I think it's a collective failing of the position here,
Yeah.
and of the offense in general.
I agree. And I think they came in with some good stuff to start the year, but that's good stuff to start the year. They haven't evolved the offense at all throughout the season, and it's looked less and less innovative as the year has gone on.
This is from JK Slate. How long should the leash be for TVD Saturday night? Listening to Dawson's press conference yesterday, it sounded like it is ride or die with TVD, win or lose. Yeah, I think that's the way the entire coaching staff probably feels about it. I think the only way TVD doesn't play is if he has a horrendous day or gets hurt again. I think that they've pretty much sent that message.
Absolutely. And I think, a healthy TVD and one with the right game plan gives you the shot to win anyway. I think you can still win with him at quarterback, even if he's hobbled, if you run the right things and put him in the right position.
This is from David P. Sims. With 4 games remaining outside of the quarterback situation, which offensive and defensive units do you expect to have the greatest influence on the end of the season record? Either they need to keep playing at a high level, or perhaps a position group that needs to step up collectively. Well, I think we realize this team is entirely built around the offensive line. I would say the unit that has the chance to most influence the way this team finishes this season is the running backs, because I think if they can get more involved, obviously I made a point how they had fewer rushes than they did passes in this last game. I think if Mario and Shannon Dawson decide, hey, we've got a nice quartet here of running backs, we're going to let them eat, and they just run behind this offensive line, I think Miami has a chance to finish this season really strong. I think if they keep the same game plan, they could win only 1 or 2 games probably down the stretch, in my opinion. So to me, I think the running backs from an offensive perspective probably have the most influence. And then I would say from a defensive perspective, the defensive line. We mentioned the injuries up front to the 2 starters at the beginning of the year, Nigel Kelly and Akeem Mesidor, how they're gone for the year. Obviously, Ruben Bain has to continue to play at a super high level for Miami to have the kind of success that they want to have.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to the offense and defensive lines. Those are going to be the two most important units the remainder of the season, because those are the ones that are going to help you grind out wins, and that's the way Mario likes it. And I think if there's one position group that I think can influence the remainder of the season in a positive way, as a surprise to other teams, would be the tight end position. If you can get the tight end involved and mix it into the offense, I think you will create a lot of opportunities for the offense, and I think you're going to catch teams off guard and make them defend the full field and do something they're not expecting you to.
All right, this is from Andrew V_17. If TVD has another performance like he did against Virginia, is it time to pull the plug? Do you think we see any Jakari Brown packages this season? I think the coaches made it pretty evident in their press conference this week that their plan from the beginning was to redshirt him and to really, and we've talked about this on the podcast here without the coaches even talking about it. That's what it seemed like the coaches were doing. They were saving him maybe for some key games, to save him for some key packages. And remember, you can play up to 4 games and still earn himself a redshirt. So I think Jakari most likely will have some packages. Again, Florida State seems like an ideal time to sort of unveil something like that, to throw a different wrinkle at the Seminoles, or even to do it against Louisville. One of these last 3 regular season games is when I can imagine him being used in that situation, and maybe potentially save for the ACC championship or a bowl game.
Absolutely, and I think that'll take some pressure off the running game as well. You'll add, if you're down a couple running backs, you could use him in a few packages to be another runner, another threat. It'll help TBD stay healthy, and I think at the end of the day, what's going to end up happening is it may not take Mario pulling TVD. It may be a situation where TVD himself says, "Listen, I'm not at 100%. I'm not playing well. I'm putting up crappy tape. I'm going to make a business decision and sit myself down and say, you know what? I'm injured. I can't play the rest of the season, and let teams know in the NFL that's why he's having a sort of a performance at the end of the year, or maybe even look in the transfer portal at the end of the season, see if he makes a move."
This is from Jeffrey Cook, JPC867. Interested in both of your thoughts on the ACC schedule release, and also if either of you will go on record and call NC State a basketball school just to annoy Dave Doran even more.
They are a basketball school. All right. Jim Valvano.
NC State's got a good program. They're just not an elite program. They're like the traditional 8-4, 7-5, and when things are really good, 9-3 program. They're just never going to be an elite program. And I think it's not Dave Doran's fault. I think it's the talent pool that they recruit from. I think North Carolina is another example, right? They start out gangbuster 6-0. The last 2 weeks, they lose to Virginia and Georgia Tech. So I think it's a North Carolina thing. Like, when have any of those programs in football ever been dominant? Like, you can't even come up with many examples. So to me,
Well, back when Lawrence Taylor was with North Carolina, I think that's when they were really good. But other
yeah,
than
but
that,
they've never played or won national championships in football.
no, never. NC State either, and they've had some amazing basketball programs. To me, NC State is kind of like Wendy's. Like they're good. You'll eat Wendy's, you'll enjoy it. I mean, it'll calm your hunger, it'll kill your hunger. But are you going to go out of your way to get Wendy's?
Yeah,
Not really.
not really. This is from Renton RC or E on Twitter. It appears it is ride or die with Tyler. Is his injuries the cause of his long ball lacking distance, zip, and accuracy, or is it mental? Also, the injuries at running back shows how important depth is at the position. Will we see Trevante Citizen back this year? We kind of already talked about the Tyler thing with the zip and all and everything else. Carlos went into detail with that, and I did as well, thinking it's injuries.
But we should highlight that people called us crazy in the offseason when we decided they should add an additional running back for depth.
Right.
And thank God they did.
Will we see Trevante Citizen back this year, Carlos? I don't know. I think a lot of it is probably Mario needing to trust him in some capacity in terms of pass blocking. I don't think we will see him out there until he's trusted, or until Miami pretty much has no choice and everybody's banged up and they need to play it, need to play him. So they're preparing him to get him ready to play. I don't think he goes in if the other guys are healthy. Just my opinion. This is from David Hernandez, D Hernan underscore. Do you think it's a mix of play calling and decision making by TVD that's causing the passing game to sputter? I would like for Dawson to dress up like McDaniels and Brashard Smith as Tyreek Hill and have some pre-snap motion this weekend.
Yes, I agree 1000%. But then if Dawson's going to dress up like Mike McDaniel, he really has to dress up like Mark Anthony because they're the same person.
All right, this is from Jay Salter, JRS Air 23 on Twitter. What happened to the offense we saw against Texas A&M? Dawson unable to make adjustments to what defenses are showing, or is it the TVD is injured and that they had to scale it back to a handful of plays he is able to physically execute? Everybody wants to talk about this offense, Carlos. I think Dawson has scaled it back in some ways.
I'll give you an answer to that. The answer is nobody had tape on this offense at the beginning of the year.
Right.
So it was very easy to come into games and have a plan that people weren't prepared for. You're also 100% healthy, so that helps. But even though we were 100% healthy, TVD said his finger injury happened in the preseason, and he was dealing with that against Texas A&M. Threw the ball fine there, so that wasn't an issue. To me, it's a situation, like I said, where they've got tape on this offense now. Dawson hasn't evolved it. The offense is what it is. Even when TVD wasn't injured like he was against Virginia this past week, he hasn't evolved the offense. He hasn't done anything different. The offense has looked the same every week since the season started, and that to me is a problem. The only difference he's really added in is a flea flicker on occasion. He's handed the ball to Brashard Smith, and he's gone two backs with Smith and Henry Parrish, or sometimes Don Chaney or AJ Allen.
Yeah, it hasn't been very imaginative. Again, I think he might just be saving some stuff too, Carlos. This is from Tyler.
Bro, this is the 8th game of the season. This dude ain't saving nothing. The only thing this guy's saving up for is to go to Wendy's.
This is from Tyler Overly, T Overly on Twitter. What's the deal with the tight ends in our offense or lack thereof? Are there not plays for them? Or are we waiting until FSU to use them? Make it make sense. This is where I add up the tight end catches. You ready for this, Carlos? Four for
Let me guess first.
Go ahead.
All right. So they just had 2. I believe they had 12 coming into the game. 14.
No. According to college football stats, 4 for Riley Williams for 46 yards and a touchdown. 4 for 43 yards for Cam McCormick, and then Jaleel Skinner 1 for 9. So let's do the math. That's 9 catches for 98 yards and a touchdown. 9 catches, 98 yards and a touchdown. And we're wondering why Elijah Lofton is going
What
to
is it? What is
Texas.
it? So it's 4 for Riley Williams, 4 for Cam McCormick, and 1 for Jaleel Skinner. That's it?
That's it. 9 catches for the tight ends this season.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. You want the running backs? Let's add up the running backs. You ready?
Yeah, because they don't throw them either.
Henry Parrish, 8 for 26. Mark Fletcher, 2 for 9. So that's 10 for 35. AJ Allen, 4 for 9. That's 14 for 44. And then Don Chaney Jr., 1 for 3. And Chris Johnson, 1 for 2. So that's 16 for 48. Woof. It's ridiculous. All right. This is from Brandon Keynes. Do Fletcher and Allen become the focal point of the offense for the last 4 games? Can we win 2 or 3 more and a bowl game with that approach and tough defense? Best Halloween costume, because I did ask to get everybody's best Halloween costume. He said was Batman. That's what Brandon says. He did you ever dress up as Batman?
I did as a kid. Do you remember those old plastic
Yes.
costumes I used to buy mine at like Casa Los Truco, which is like this place on 8th Street and like 15th Avenue, and those plastic masks with the rubber band in the back and the plastic, those things sucked. But yeah, I was Batman a few times. I even tried to make my own Batman costume once. Didn't work out.
Didn't look good. Do they become the focal point of the offense for the last 4 games? And can we win 2 or 3? Let's start with the focal point. Who do you think is the focal point? Because I honestly don't know who is. It used to be Xavier Restrepo. For one game, it became Brashard Smith. And then this last game, it was Fletcher and Allen in the backfield. Who do you think is the focal point of this offense? Let's start with that.
I think the focal point of the offense is the offensive line. Okay. However, you can leverage them because they're your best asset on the offensive line. That's where you go. And I think, like you said, if you've got 4 backs that can run, 3 backs that can go, whatever the case, you roll the dice and go with those guys, right? You go behind them. And I think moving forward, What I would like to see is Colby Young be more of a focal point of the passing game,
Yeah.
because every time he touches the ball, he makes plays, and it's it's mind-boggling to me how they do not run stuff for him and create opportunities for him.
Um, and then the last one from Brandon was, can we win 2 or 3 more games? Yeah, they can win 2 or 3 more games.
Yep.
Winning ugly like they have, and playing good defense. But to me, the defense is the most interesting part because Branson Dean came back, had 2 sacks this last game. You have Ruben Bain playing out of his mind, 6.5 sacks. We know these physical battle guys are gonna get nicked up again. Like this is not gonna be like a fully healthy finish 4-4, 4 games down the stretch plus a bowl game. So who knows? But right now the defense is basically carrying this team.
Yeah, it's, and I think there's still room for improvement on the defensive side. But again, it's going to be the offensive and defense lines to me that carry this team home.
And this last one from Franco Anton, Skip Sucksmaker on Twitter. Are they having the
Oh,
Ja'Cory package for Florida State? FSU's run defense isn't great and could be a possible matchup we could exploit with our O-line and his strong running ability. Well, Franco, you mentioned FSU's run defense not being very good. Let me look at what FSU's run defense really is. You ready? Let's go to that.
I'd say they're top 40.
They're 64th, 4.02 yards per rush. So yeah, they're mediocre. But again, they're so good against the pass. Only 3 touchdowns allowed through the air. And they've got 9 turnovers. They're +5 in the turnover margin right now. And only allowing 5 yards a play, which is 28th. So they're not terrible. As I get messaged over and over again from my buddies here in the ACC. So I don't know, Carlos. What do you think? Do you think ultimately we see Ja'Cory this season?
I would say I'd like to see him. I think that'll be another dimension to the offense that'll help.
Mm-hmm.
If Tyler gets shut down for the rest of the year, maybe after this game, we definitely see him, I think.
Okay. Well, that's gonna wrap it up for this episode this week for Wide Right. Carlos, where are you going trick or treating tonight? Are you going out in your Uncle Fluke costume, or what are you doing?
I am not. We have a haunted mansion theme for the family this evening. We're going in our local neighborhood here, riding around and going around the houses here because they do some great stuff with the houses here in terms of decorations and setting up little mini haunted houses for the kids. So it'll be fun.
All right. Well, you enjoy it. I will be here in my house in Pembroke Pines, walking around with the girls, doing the trick or treat thing as well. Stay safe out there, and thank you. Don't forget, make sure you subscribe to the MIA All Day podcast as well as Wide Right. If you can subscribe to The Athletic, I'd be much appreciated. You can follow us here on YouTube or wherever you download your podcasts. For Carlos Ledo, I'm Manny Navarro of The Athletic. We will see you next time.
Peace.